kind of known. We did a lot of study and input into the trade structure. And there are a lot of stakeholders and parties and different traders involved. It's a very rough scheme. Here the skins come from. We have professional hunters, we are just opportunistic hunters. In some range it seems like they're much more doing this opportunistically than professionally. Some directly deliver their skins to large-scale collectors or to the middlemen or small-scale collectors. This also depends on the price, of course. How much do they pay for skins they receive from the collector? If here's a strong middleman who directly has a connection to the exporter, probably they will directly deliver their skins to the middleman instead to the small and large-scale collectors. We also have regional traders, of course, and they can be established anywhere with a direct connection to the exporter. And then, of course, the 4 different uses of reticulated pythons, where the skin trade is the major use. Consumption is a side trade, and traditional medicines as well, and pet trade as well. Yeah, and then we have the problem, an issue with stockpiling. Many traders stockpile their skins and waiting for prices to increase. So this is often a number which is not included in any accounts. And here again, now we know this picture. We have seen this. We have seen this during Alison's presentation, and I think Marcus as well. We have now, well, if we look at the PDA before, we could say now we collapse actually the number of criteria or indicators which are important, possibly important to decide on the conservation status or the sustainability of a species. And here, this is just an attempt. It shows you that this star-like red figure is much wider. Just now we've seen smaller ones. The smaller it is, the more likely it is that the trade is sustainable and does not affect local populations. The bigger it is, as we have seen, the more unsustainable. So this measure, this scoring system, I want you to think over later on for certain criteria you think you can choose and assess during the campus we have here to see if you have similar results and if they match or if they completely vary between each other. Before though going on, we have a number of biological criteria and also other criteria. You may also think of, maybe you have other criteria which could be valuable to include. Again, I think that an NDF is very difficult to standardize for all species. Maybe you can think aside of this when you're making your NDF. So what do all these models have in common? The PDA I showed you, the system dynamics model, and the NDF model. They do and can only work if reasonable, sound scientific data is evident, is available. We cannot do an NDF if reports or scientific studies go back 10 years ago, because we cannot demonstrate the same situation. 10 years is a lot, and a lot has changed. Encroachment, human population increase, habitat degradation. So other factors have changed in the environment of that species. So we have to think about this. Some final remarks before you make the NDF. Just for your understanding, if you take out a certain number, as I write here, of specimens, you have to make sure that this number retains the viability of the species, so it can reproduce in itself to be maintained as part of an ecosystem. And this is something very crucial we have to keep in mind for Appendix 2 species. it also says we have to take out a number, or can take out a number of specimens if we maintain the functionality of that species in their ecosystem. And this is a very important question, which is actually not per se and in situ, on the spot, considered by scientific authorities by trading specimens in, or species in, listed in Appendix 2, especially the species. So as I said, just repeating this, by making an NDF, we cannot only include the biology or trade data, we also have to look at other factors which may cause a decline to the species. It can be chemical pollution. Like we have very clean rubber plantations in parts of Southeast Asia with no undergrowth, there's nothing there. The farmers there use rodenticides, pesticides, there's no shelter, no undergrowth. Whereas in some parts of West Kalimantan, we have rubber plantations which are extensively managed with a lot of shelter, with a lot of undergrowth. So also, well, inviting species to find shelter and an alternative ecosystem to sustain. Sorry, there's something went wrong here. There we go. And then, of course, we may have to make sure the data we compile, what quality is it? I mean, the quality you can often read off the methodology section. How long was the study? If you have a rapid assessment in some field study, looking quickly, snapshot-like, we want to make an NDF in 2 weeks. This is just not possible. You can just get a rough snapshot of the situation. But again, this happens. And one of the reasons why this happens also is a lack of funds. There's not many funds coming into to study the conservation status of species. Although the CITES trade database or red lists in the IUCN always write recommended field studies on the conservation status, we do not know. We just do not know. And then, as I said, in making the NDF, what are the indicators? Are these the right ones to choose? Can we leave a session, a working group session, saying, I think we all chose the right indicators, now we can trade the species in the same numbers? Or now we establish a zero quota, now we ban trade or whatever, it's unsustainable, we can't go on. So this is something you may have to think about. And this is the collapsed version Alison already pointed out. I still see we have like more than an hour time, so maybe we can use the single indicators and not only looking at the main criteria as biology management, control, monitoring, incentives and protection. Maybe we can look at them one by one. We have enough time. And we can also go around and assess you with this and, well, not assess you, that would not be fair, but listen to you and see what you decide on. And we have enough time. Here we have a scoring system which is slightly different, 0 to 4. So I think, what do we choose, Alison? Is it this one or 1 to 5? It doesn't matter, so maybe just choose then 1 to 5, and avoiding the 0 points here, and then we see where this goes on. Thank you very much for your attention, and good luck with your NDF, and we will now distribute the, oh, they're already distributed. Okay. Any questions? Yes.
Can you come back to the circle, the last before this one here?
Yes.
I just wondering that how you interpret.
Yes. Okay. That's a good question. When can we say, like, if we have a result like this, is it sustainable or not sustainable? That's the question. Now, we look at, well, we have to decide on this. Here we see biology, the species seems quite resistant to trade. Status also. Yeah, but apparently here in the management and monitoring systems, they have to be improved. If we have these major criteria, this criteria biology would also include information on the population size and density. So this would tell us actually that there is still enough. But if this management system is not going to get improved soon, maybe here we will have higher values. So in this case, personally, I'm not looking at the species now. I'm trying to ignore the species here. But I would say, well, it's something to discuss for yourself. But I do not want to give you some feelings or incentives from my side. But I would treat a species very carefully like this, and probably would reduce the quota until these things have been improved. Because as we see here, population does not seem to be in decline. We cannot ban or halt the trade. So I would probably lower the quota here, but this is like a mixed thing. It can be sustainable the next smaller period, but if this goes on like this, the management system and monitoring system, it may quickly fall into an unsustainable situation. Yes?
Do you give the same importance to those factors, or are there factors that are more important, like, I don't know, is biology more important rather than monitoring, or what do you do? Is it the same thing?
Every criteria has the same value. I mean, you have the same scoring system. So you have 1 to 5. So if this one is 1, this one is 1, and 2 or 3, 5, you say something is going on, there's something wrong. These have to be low as well. This situation is not okay. So it has to be somewhere more down. So if you are a scientific authority and management authority, and let's say you're honest, you do not want to make money with this, and you argue that I think, over the years, honestly, did we monitor the species, and how did we do this? And then probably many will decide, okay, well, it has to be here, 5. It can't be somewhere here. Because this would be in favor for the trade, certainly. So, but I don't want to give you my opinion on certain things. I want you to think about, in the end, who is the ideal working group or audience to decide in making an NDF, to speak about this. This is something very important, I think. Are there any more questions? I think not, and then I think just start off working in your groups, looking at the indicators, deciding on the right indicators you think, and argue as good as possible. And how much time should we give for this? I mean, we have 1 hour left. 20 minutes should be fine. So 20 past 12. Yes, Miss.
I don't really get it. I mean, what are we going supposed to do? Are we looking on this?
Yeah, sorry.
Sorry, I'm not really sure that I really understand what you are going to do. So
You're taking that list you have now and trying to think about the talk I gave, and of course the talks I gave on that specific species. You need to assess now, and also of course using background data from Alison and Marcos in identifying the indicators between 1 and 5. Just give a number.
So we pick a species.
Yes, you take the reticulated python as an example species.
So where do we get that down on biology?
Well, that's what I said. Just I gave you information through my talk as an example. You do not have to be the same. Well, I just gave you information that is available. And you can maybe discuss it differently. Every indicator, every major criteria, you can discuss it differently. And then, because the NDF I showed you on the reticulate pattern may not be the right one. So do not feel guided through that what I showed you. You will draw your own decision. Is that clear? Okay.